Welcome to Leadership Log, which is a podcast for the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center community on topics of interest. And today it's trying to demystify the pay pool process and get a better understanding of how that pay pool, or how the pay pools function, how they operate. So we've got a group of individuals here who are well acquainted with the pay pool process, and we're going to go through and meet each of them now. So we will start with Mr. Stanhouse.
Good afternoon.
And could you introduce yourself, sir, and explain a little bit of your background with pay pools?
Oh, absolutely. I apologize. Yes, I'm Ed Stanhouse. I am the chief at the helicopter program office, a career acquisition officer, previous military and civilian background, and really been in several of our personnel systems, both GS when we tried the NSPS. And now with acquisition demo, and it's good having that cross cut just to learn those experiences on what works and what doesn't in all of them, and as we try to continue to make our rating and assessment system better and more equitable. In previous, I've participated both as a rater, as a second level rater, as well as a sub pay pool and a pay pool member in those boards.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mr. Brown.
So, hello, everyone. I'm D. Brown. I'm down at Robins Air Force Base as the Deputy Site Lead. Been working with our Center Senior Functional and AQ with some of the pay pools and diversity and inclusion and making sure it's equitable for everyone. And I've been in LCMC for about 7 years, as Mr. Stanhouse is. I'm military civilian, been in different pay systems, and we truly want to make sure that this is equitable for everyone who's involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Maddox.
Hi, I'm Janet Maddox. I'm a division chief in the Mobility Directorate for the C5 program office. And my main experience with pay pools is just as a rater and supervisor, and making sure that all of the inputs that need to be provided as a supervisor are provided to the pay pool for consideration.
Thank you. Ms. Zuchon.
Hi, I'm Marianne Zuchon. I'm the Chief of Finance at the ISR and SOF Directorate, and I've been involved with the pay pools since we've started in ACQ Demo, first as a member of a sub pay pool and now as the sub pay pool manager last year and this year.
Thank you. And Ms. Shear.
Hi, I'm Kristen Shear. I am the Chief of Finance for the Mobility and Trainers Directorate. I have been a sub pay pool chair since ACQ Demo started, first for Agile Combat Support Directorate, and now for the last few years in Mobility and Trainers. And I'm also a member of the pay pool for finance at the center level.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Mott.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. My name is Emir Mott. Currently, I'm the Deputy Director at the 88th Air Base Wing Civil Engineer Group. And I started basically, in terms of ACQ Demo, that is, being just a supervisor rating a ton of employees. And then I was a member of the sub pay pool. This year will be my first year being the sub pay pool manager, as well as a participant on the pay pool panel. Thank you.
Okay. And Ms. Cerney.
Yeah, hi, I'm Barb Cerny. I am the deputy of the 88th Communications Group at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I was the pay pool manager for a pay pool until last year when the wing consolidated its 4 pay pools into a single pay pool. And then I became the sub pay pool manager and a member of the main pay pool. So lots of experience watching the pay pools run.
Great. And Ms. Bowerman.
Hi, I'm Natalie Bauerman. I am the Chief of HR for the Logistics Functional in LCMC. Prior to that, I was a Division Chief in the DP Home Office. So I've been a member of the DP pay pool every year since we started ACT Demo. So as a home office division chief and now as an HR chief and a functional, I do still participate in DP's pay pool every year.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Melton.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Melton. I'm the pay pool administrator for logistics, and I have been doing that job since 2016. I sit on both the pay pool and the sub panels.
All right, great. So we've got a great group of people today that are very knowledgeable of the pay pools and the sub pay pools, and that's kind of our starting point today, is kind of getting an idea of who comprises the sub pay pools and the pay pools themselves. And we'll start with Mr. Stanhouse, sir.
Yes, hey, let me start with first a sub pay pool, because really that's the first board or first panel that actually meets to review in a group the individual ratings and assessments. So the sub pay pool usually consists of the raters from various divisions or within the directorate, and it's chaired usually by the second level supervisor at that level, such as a deputy PEO or deputy director. And it is really designed to be that set of individuals that are a little bit closer to the individuals, so they have a little bit of personal insight to have that firsthand knowledge and help aggregate a list of ratees up to that pay pool level. It's really designed in that group process where we review every individual as rating by the supervisor. That does two things. One, it helps normalize across those different supervisors. So one supervisor doesn't either rate more favorably or disfavorably than other raters. Also, then it serves to support an equity check to make sure that individuals are actually being assessed what the members see as equitably. And then those results then are rolled up then as inputs to the pay pool level. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Shear.
Yes, in finance, we have a lot less employees that are in ACT Demo. So our pay pool structure and sub pay pool structure is a little bit different than you might see in engineering or other functionals. We do have some raters that will attend at the sub pay pool level, but it's always represented at the directorate level. So the directorate, organizational senior functional for finance, is the representation that's on the various sub panels. Sub pay pool panels. So we will group them based on similar mission, because we try to group based on where we would see similar contributions for various grades and structure. And we meet as a team at the sub pay pool level. Normally there's 4 to 5 of us across 4 to 5 directorates. And then that sub pay pool manager then goes and represents that group at the pay pool level at the center. So Ms. Sauers, who's the comptroller, is the pay pool manager for the FM positions in ACT Demo.
Okay. And Mr. Mott.
So I like what both everyone has said, and the only thing I really like to add is that it really depends on how large a sub pay pool is, right? That rolls up into a pay pool, and having representation as closest to the rater and the employee as possible becomes very important. Here, for instance, in the civil engineering group, and also in various groups across the wing, there are sub pay pools, just because of the quantity of people that are in it, and so those sub pay pools, which really is chaired by our division and squadron leads. And then that rolls up to the sub pay pool, and whereas in my role, being the deputy director, run the sub pool and then represent on the pay pool.
Mr. Brown.
Sorry about that. I had to take myself off on mute. So I thought Ms. Shear made an excellent point that, in the sub pay pool, it's again closest to the individual, but it's grouping like individuals or like jobs for that equity. That's very important as that moves into the pay pool, because as you get larger, you get more or further away from your supervisor or further away from the individuals who are best know your contribution to the mission. Over.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, sir. And Ms. Bowerman.
Yeah, just one additional thing I wanted to add to that is that, you know, in a small pay pool like I'm in, we don't even have a sub panel. We don't have any sub pay pools that have to run. The last few years that we've had the DP pay pool, we've had maybe about 50 people. So, you know, we kind of have that benefit that we don't have to run a sub panel. We're just the regular pay pool panel with the pay pool manager. But the nice thing there is that we obviously have a lot of personal knowledge of our folks, but we do have probably more representatives on the sub or on the pay pool than some others, because we have all of the home office division chiefs and the functional HR chiefs all represented on that panel, to make sure that, you know, we bring that equity and we are looking at everyone equally, because we are all there representing our employees. So just a slight difference, because we are a much smaller pay pool in DP.
Okay. And are there other differences across some of the other career fields? If other people seen differences like that? Ms. Cerney?
One of the things that the wings deal with, so the group at the 66th and the 88th Air Base Wing, is we do have sitting commanders. And so we do not want those commanders to be left out of the process. So the sub-panels are always consisting of those squadron commanders. So that has to be taken into consideration too. I mean, their job is to take care of their people, and us civilians don't leave them out of the mix.
Okay, all right, thank you. So one of the common roles that's mentioned a lot is a pay pool administrator. So can we talk a little bit, first off, is anybody a pay pool administrator, or have they served as one previously? And can you talk about some of the responsibilities and roles of the administrator? Ms. Bowerman, can you handle that?
If I could get myself off mute. Jenny Melton's actually on to represent us as our pay pool administrator, so she could definitely answer that question. She's been our PPA every year in the logistics functional. Okay,
Ms. Melton?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I was trying to raise my hand and couldn't figure it out.
Okay.
So yes, I maintain all the database, which is for ACT Demo is called Castanet. So we make sure that everybody's data is in the system. We also make sure that the entire pay pool meets all the milestones, meaning they get all the emails and training, anything that goes along with ACT Demo to make sure that they meet the milestones at the end of the cycle, so that everyone gets rated on time and appropriately. We support the pay pool. I also support sub-panels during the CCAS cycle, or the contribution management system is what's used. And we make sure that all the scoring is correct in there and all the other data that goes along with the employee. And we also support any post-cycle activity or any pre-cycle activity, which is going on right now.
All right. Great. And so we'll move on and we'll talk a little bit about the scoring and how the scoring is done. I think that's probably one of the biggest mystery points, is how you rate and how you kind of rack and stack these things. So let's move on to that and discuss what factors do the pay pool and the sub pay pools look at? How do you evaluate these? How do you assign a point value? Mr. Stanhouse, would you like to weigh in on that, sir?
Yes. So really the assessment really begins with those employee inputs, and so the supervisor really looks at those inputs, those contributions compared to the employee's contribution plan, job description, and performance expectations to include their position, right? So those all go into the significance of those contributions versus expectations, which are then then rolled up, and we look at 3 levels and of requirements. We look at the job achievement, innovation, teamwork, and communications, as well as then finally mission support, are really those 3 big factor areas that the employees are assessed in, and to further goals and contributions. That then rolls in the instructor, the evaluator provides a numerical score for each one of those then up rolling up, and they're discussed at the pay pool level, and they end up with an OCS, right? With overall contribution score for that. Then that's looked at, and it's sub pay pool then. That is looked at across the individuals. You have a recommended rating, and then really again you look at it across the individuals to make sure. And it was a great comment I believe that Ms. Shear had, that you look at like employees, like functions, right? Doing like functions to make sure that those OCSs are consistent for the level of position, the expectation for that person, as well as the degree of impact on the mission. And again, the organizational mission as well.
Okay.
Over.
Thanks, sir. Ms. Zuchon.
Yes, one thing I wanted to add to that is the other thing we look at is whether or not the contributions are enduring. I think that's a key difference, because to add into that OCS and to increase the base salary, what we're looking at are those contributions that will continue throughout the organizations versus a one-time project. There are ways to compensate for the one-time project, but for the OCS to change, for the pluses, the whatever, we're really looking at those enduring contributions where that individual is going to continue working at that level and thus need to be rewarded or need to be awarded at have their contributions and their salary at that level.
Great, thank you. And Ms. Cerney.
Yes, for those people who are like the administrators, I really have to give kudos to them, like Ms. Melton, because that spreadsheet is probably the most complicated spreadsheet I have ever seen in my life. And I think everyone would agree with me. And sometimes it does things that we don't expect it to do. If a supervisor wants to give an employee a, 3L, 3L, 3H, 3M, 3L, it might end up being a completely different number in the spreadsheet than what the supervisor wanted to see. And so we also, when we're doing our sub-pay pools, is ask them to give us their expectations as a supervisor. So I'm going to give Johnny these categorical scores and I'm going to give him a +2. But maybe in the spreadsheet, I can't make those 2 things match. So having the supervisor give us a little bit of clue on the side, so to speak, we actually send them a different spreadsheet to say, okay, I want Johnny to fall into C1. I want Johnny to get this. I want Johnny to get that. Really helps us realize where the supervisor is actually going with their appraisal. Because like I said, sometimes when that spreadsheet is printed out and the formulas are assigned to it, it does not match what the supervisor expected. So one of the things that we in the pay panel have to do is kind of look at how the spreadsheet is doing things against what the expectations of the supervisors are, and the write-ups and the CCRIs and where they're falling in with everybody else. So it is a very complicated mathematical process that we go through. This is not a throwing darts at a dartboard. It is absolutely discussing, dozens of aspects of every different appraisal to make sure that they are fairly applied across the board.
Thank you. Mr. Brown.
And so I definitely agree with Ms. Cerney there. Employees need to know that they're their best advocate, and working with their supervisors and asking those so what questions, as someone said earlier, what is an enduring contribution versus what is a one-time? Those are important to understand. We have a lot of people working projects which are valued, but again, how is that impacting the mission from that enduring standpoint? So I would say to employees, be your best advocate. Understand what you do and articulate that through the CRI, contribution, result, impact. And ask yourself about that impact. How does it impact the mission?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Ms. Shear.
Yes, and I was going to add, in looking at these categorical scores, I think someone brought up a good point on what's the supervisor's expectations. And what we've dealt with over the years is the focus being on delta scores. And we've worked very hard to get back to, this is contribution based, not performance based. There's a performance aspect to it, but to the point of when you look at these pay bands, there's a fairly large array of potential salaries there. So you can't expect everybody has a job in which they can contribute at the top of the band of an NH4. Likewise for an NH3. So part of what we do when we look at this is looking at the categorical scores and these discriminators for these 3 factors. We're trying to assess what's the depth and complexity and scope. And that's where it comes into, really, we read every appraisal, and we go through and we look at all of the NH3s at the same time, the higher, maybe the branch chiefs, and then maybe we look at the div chiefs, so that we're looking at similar scope and complexity. And it really helps us see where there might be an outlier, where you may have somebody that's not familiar with ACK Demo that comes in and says, I've got a superstar, I think they should be a Delta 10 because they're firing on all 4 cylinders. And it's like, but they're not performing the work of a PEO if they're in an H3. So I think we have to really get to what is the level of contribution and kind of baseline it there first before you go after the performance.
So I think it's important to note for employees that it's not a blind process where you plug some factors into a spreadsheet and it spits out a score and that's what you get, okay? But it's more of a human process where you guys are really taking a lot of things into account and trying to come up with a fair and equitable decision. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. All right. So let's move on a little bit to how employees' contributions are communicated and assessed in the sub-pay pool process. So I think, what is the process for discussing these things and helping everybody understand, especially when you've got maybe slightly dissimilar career fields? I know that's an issue in the wing a lot of times. Ms. Cerney, would you like to take that?
Yeah, so we in the wing deal with vastly different career fields. I think we have something like 40 or 50 different series represented on our pay panel because we have everything from nurses to HR people. So in CE, you're going to have engineers, you're going to have supervisors, you've got people in MSG who are personnelists. So it's just this huge wide variety. And truly the way we start off is by those outliers. If we get someone to come in with a +10, we are really going to scrutinize, why is the supervisor providing a +10? What is the motivation behind that? Let's go read every word. Let's try to figure this out. And if the CRIs don't stand up to this person performing at that contribution level, no, we're not going to allow that 10 to continue to ride. And it's the same thing like with a -4. That's getting kind of low. First of all, does this person know that they're going to get a -4? Has the supervisor talked to them? Have the feedbacks been taking place all year long? The last thing we're going to allow a supervisor to do is use this system as punishment and lay that on the laps of the panel to take care of. So conversations literally run the gambit depending on what the supervisor puts in those spreadsheets as those categorical scores, as the plus or the minus deltas, and what the CRIs look like. And every individual could end up having a completely different conversation against them. So you know, this is why our first panel sat for 32 hours. We've gotten better, but you know, when you think about it, it takes a lot of time to put 400 people through a discussion. And we do want to discuss everyone. I mean, even if someone's coming in with a 0, we don't want to just go, oh, okay, fine. Okay, so what does that 0 mean for this person? Where'd they fall in? You know, is there something they could do to contribute more or contribute less, kinds of things? So it's a very in-depth conversation on everybody sitting on that spreadsheet.
Thank you. Ms. Bowerman.
Yeah, we don't have some of the issues that the wing have in our functional pay pools in the center because thankfully most of our employees do similar work. But we are very careful to make sure that we compare employees in like positions together. So we're all, you know, maybe in one series, we're all 343s. So that's, you know, a lot easier than what the wing is dealing with. But we have some that are, you know, our management analysts that, you know, were previously like GS-12 equivalent journeymen. We have folks who are tech experts that are still non-supervisors, but they're kind of at a higher level as a technical lead. We have first level supervisors. You know, we're very careful to kind of group those employees together, even though they may all be, or they are all in the same pay band for us. They're all NH3s, but they're all very different as far as their level of responsibility and, you know, potential contribution. It's really not fair to compare a journeyman management analyst with a supervisor in a large functional that has a much larger scope of responsibility. So we are very careful with that. And someone mentioned, I think it was Mr. Brown mentioned the CRIs. I just wanted to kind of emphasize that from an employee perspective. It was very awkward for me in the first couple of years writing in that format. I didn't like it. I was used to more of a bullet style of writing, but I would highly recommend forcing yourself to write your assessment in that format because you have to get to that impact. And even, you know, I'm an NH4, I should be able to easily get to that, but unless I write mine specifically in that CRI format, it is very easy to just list out a bunch of bullets on your contribution, and that's not at all getting to the result or the impact. So, you know, a huge takeaway, I think, for employees is to really focus on not just giving us a bullet of what you did that year, but how it impacted your organization. Thanks.
It's interesting across the board in these conversations we've been having, the CRI and the importance of employees documenting the impact has been a common theme. So, Mr. Stanhouse.
No, and on that theme, I'll just echo Mr. Brown's input. The employee is their own best advocate. Every pay pool or sub-pay, well, I'm sorry, every sub-pay pool member reviews every assessment, every rating in there, and to really understand what that impact and the contributions of those employees are. And then, of course, that's informed by the rater or supervisor that really has a little bit more of a firsthand knowledge. And people can ask, what about the folks that may not know me for those larger sub-pay pools? But on every board that I've sat on or supported, the supervisor that's representative on that sub-pay pool has talked to those supervisors to get better insight into the process. Sorry. And then
it's all right. It's part of the connected world.
Yes. But in that process, so that really speaks, that's where it all starts. And that's how that employee knows and can have the most impact and input to that process. Over.
Thank you. Mr. Brown. Oh, come off mute, sir.
Yeah, you know, I keep hitting the hand and not the mute button. So yeah, you know, I wanted to add that, of course, I think every employee needs to understand that, as you said, it's not a dartboard throwing event. It is individuals who are in leadership really looking at those individuals and trying to fairly and equitably compensate individuals for what they bring to the mission. And everyone needs to understand, again, we all want more compensation. We all want more money. That's just an extrinsic factor. Everybody wants a new car. But again, we have to focus in on what is the mission? What is your contribution? What is the impact? Write it in CRI and you will get to where you need to be. Over.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Zipscan.
Yes, and one thing I'll add to that, though, is one thing we see is as employees are trying to do that, or even supervisors are doing that, sometimes they think more words are better. It's about being succinct and getting to the point of your impacts. A long dissertation doesn't necessarily help you, and I think people get confused with the number of words versus the impact. You should be writing very succinct, short, to the point impacts, and that will really help the sub-pay pool and the pay pool with their assessing those contributions.
Thank you. Ms. Maddox, would you like to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I was just thinking, you know, if you've rated on military in the past for OPRs and things, you're always taught you got to fill all that white space, and like awards packages, you got to fill it all. So yeah, that's a great point. I think, you know, it's not about filling the white space, but it's really just about what the impact of the words are. And then also, I think to Mr. Stanhouse's point, if you have submitted all your information and you're, you know, waiting for you get your sub-pay pool results, make sure you're asking for that feedback, because I think getting the feedback from your particular sub-pay pool manager is really important for supervisors and employees to know more about how their pay pool is viewing things and how they can improve kind of going forward.
So let's ask a question for those employees who maybe don't have a representative in their functional area on the panel. How can they be assured that they're going to get a fair and equitable observation of their ratings? Ms. Melton, we'll go to you.
So one thing, just back a little bit, on the CRIs, make sure that you write them to your individual accomplishments. We get a lot of people who write to the program's accomplishment, but when we're reviewing those, we really need to know what the individual did. That's what's important. You could have a whole team of people who worked on a certain project, but we need to know exactly what their role was. And that helps a lot. But we do have we have about 15 series in our pay pool. We have some that are more minor than others where we don't have a lot. And we take great care in still reviewing those and making sure that we are getting with those supervisors for their intent. And we make sure that the write-ups are correct. And during the sub-panel process, there is a lot of back and forth between the members of the panel and the supervisors. So that if supervisors' intent was not clear, they have the ability to provide a rewrite or provide more information. And it really helps to solidify what the person has done, what their contributions were, and if we have the right scoring.
So we're just about at the end of our time, but before we close, I want to see if there's anything that perhaps we've left out or we missed, or maybe a point that you'd like to really re-emphasize to everyone. We'll start with Mr. Mott.
Sorry. Yeah, so I would just say that I think just to foot stomp what a lot of people have said, the main thing is I think it's very important for employees to have confidence. I think Barb hit it best when she mentioned the rigorousness that goes into looking at and evaluating every employee. Some employees may have the feeling that that they're being overlooked or they're being given given due process to their contributions, but that is not the case. What was talked about in previous podcasts is this isn't a writing composition contest, and all the checks and balances of the rater, the pay pool panels, and all of that helps to make sure that everyone is looked at and graded equitably across the board. And that's just a confidence that I would like every employee to take away and feel comfortable about.
Thanks, sir. Ms. Cerney?
Yeah, so we have a former GS9 in the system who is the mail manager. He supervises all of the people who deliver the mail on the base. So, we don't sit there and compare him by himself to, say, myself, who used to be a GS15 comp sci person coming in. So yes, he would be in there by himself. There are no peers to compare him against. So what we have is the write-up. You know, what are his contributions and how is he, you know, providing those services to the base? You know, so I think we've emphasized 1,000 times the CRI, the CRI, the CRI. It's the basis of everything that we do. And if you poorly write your CRI as your self-assessment, and your supervisor poorly writes a CRI for his or her assessment, the pay panel doesn't have a lot to rest on. So, you know, if anyone takes anything away, it's solid, confident CRIs. Tell us what those impacts are to your mission. And if your mission is simply to deliver mail every day, well then by golly gee whiz, make sure that it is impactful and that it's good and people are getting what they're supposed to get.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Brown.
So agree with Mr. Mott here. Confidence in the system is key. And the reason Ms. Watern and LCMC CC General McMurray are doing these open and transparent events are for the individuals in the workforce to understand there's no hidden sauce in doing these pay pools and sub-pay pool panels. In AQ, one of the things that our Center Senior Functional wanted to bring across is he's looked at a broad cross-section of leaders, race, gender, et cetera, to ensure that everyone feels that inclusivity and diversity is on these panels. So we want to make sure that everyone understands there's, again, no hidden sauce. Thank you. Over.
Thank you. And I think with that, we'll conclude this discussion. I really appreciate everybody's time today and look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you.
Thanks, Daryl.